What happens when a high-stakes bet spirals into something far beyond winning or losing? Imagine a wealthy, arrogant man who thinks he can control everything, until he meets someone who turns his world upside down. In this tale of revenge, redemption, and unexpected love, secrets unravel, lives are transformed, and the past comes back to haunt in ways no one saw coming. Can a marriage born out of manipulation evolve into something real? What does it take to forgive the unforgivable? Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions as two people navigate pain, guilt, and hope, proving that sometimes, even the most broken pieces can create something beautiful. In the bustling city of London, during a lavish party at a historic mansion, Martin Marshall, a wealthy and arrogant man known for his ruthless business tactics, found himself intrigued by a challenge. His close friend Jonathan, with a mischievous grin, threw out an audacious bet. "Martin, I bet you wouldn't have the guts to marry a woman who doesn't fit your usual type." The prize: $1 million to the winner, but with a catch. Martin had to stay married for at least 6 months. Martin, always eager to prove himself, accepted without hesitation. The woman in question was Olivia Richards, someone who didn't conform to conventional beauty standards. As days passed, Martin learned more about Olivia. She was confident, independent, and strong-willed, unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Their first meeting took place at a luxurious restaurant. When Olivia arrived, she immediately noticed how different she was from anyone Martin had met before. She wasn't intimidated by the fancy setting or by Martin himself. "You must be Martin Marshall," Olivia said directly as she sat down. "And you must be Olivia Richards," Martin replied with a controlled smile, extending his hand. She hesitated briefly before shaking it with a strong grip, showing her determination. "Let's not beat around the bush," Chloe began, her tone straightforward. "I know why we're here. I know about the bet, the terms, and the conditions." Martin was surprised by her bluntness but didn't show it. "And yet you still agreed to meet?" he asked, curious about her motivations. Olivia paused for a moment before answering. "Let's just say I have my reasons. I'm not naive, Martin. 6 months may seem short, but a lot can change in that time. If you think you can manipulate or control me, you're mistaken." Martin smiled. Olivia was proving to be more of a challenge than he had anticipated, which only made things more interesting for him. As their first meeting ended, Martin found himself increasingly intrigued by Olivia. She wasn't like anyone he had met before. She wasn't afraid of him, and that piqued his curiosity, even admiration. Days passed, and Martin couldn't stop thinking about how to approach the next step. He was used to being the master of the game, but now it seemed Olivia had her own moves. Their second meeting took place at a simple cafe, a far cry from the glamorous restaurants Martin usually frequented. Olivia had suggested the spot, and Martin, curious, agreed. He wanted to understand who she was and why she had agreed to what seemed like a temporary contract of marriage. When Martin arrived, Olivia was already there, sipping tea with a calm smile. She greeted him warmly without the coldness of their first encounter, but still carried herself with that same unshakable confidence. "I thought you preferred 5-star restaurants," Olivia teased as Martin sat down. "Sometimes it's good to break the routine," Martin replied, trying to sound casual though he felt slightly out of his element. They chatted for a while, exchanging surface-level details, but Olivia quickly got to the point. "If we're really going through with this, I want to make a few things clear," Chloe said, placing her cup of tea on the table. "I'm not interested in your money or your luxury lifestyle. 6 months is 6 months, and I plan on walking away from this exactly the same as I entered." Martin watched her carefully. He knew she was being honest. Olivia was the type of woman who knew what she wanted, and clearly, marriage wasn't something she saw as a way to climb the social ladder like many others might. "So, what do you want, Chloe?" Martin asked, genuinely curious. "Freedom," she answered without hesitation. "I want you to know that even though we're entering into this agreement, I won't be controlled by you. I have my own life, and that's not going to change because of a temporary marriage." Martin smiled. It wasn't the answer he expected, but at the same time, He didn't mind granting Olivia this freedom. To him, marriage was just a formality to win the bet. If she wanted to keep her independence, it wouldn't bother him. Fine, Martin agreed. 6 months after that, we go our separate ways. Olivia watched him for a moment, as if wanting to be sure he really agreed to the terms. She had accepted this challenge with a plan in mind and was determined to ensure everything went according to her wishes. Deep down, she knew Martin might try to manipulate the situation, but she also trusted her own strength to resist his influence. The meeting ended on friendly terms, with both leaving with their roles clearly defined. Olivia would keep her independence, and Martin would ensure that the marriage was nothing more than a formality. But as the days passed and the wedding date approached, Martin couldn't help but feel that maybe this game wasn't as simple as he had imagined. The wedding took place in a cold, unceremonious manner, much like a meticulously orchestrated business contract. Martin Marshall, with his strategic mindset, already saw himself as the winner of the bet. He was certain that the 6 months would fly by and that Olivia, no matter how stubborn, would eventually give in to the luxurious lifestyle he was about to offer her. Right after the ceremony, Martin took Olivia to his massive penthouse in the heart of London, a monument to his wealth. The huge glass windows reflected the city lights, and the interior was filled with the most expensive and exclusive decor. To him, this was the real battleground where he would win Olivia over through the power of his material world. But from the very first moment, Olivia made it clear she wasn't going to back down. As soon as she stepped into the penthouse, she maintained a distant demeanor. The look she gave Martin wasn't one of admiration but of defiance. 6 months, Martin, not a day more, she said firmly, walking over to one of the large windows, looking at the city without being impressed by the luxury around her. Martin smiled, confident as ever. He was used to this kind of resistance in the beginning. Every woman that had been in his life eventually bent to his charm and wealth. Olivia wouldn't be any different, or so he thought. In the first few days after the wedding, Martin tried everything to impress her. He showered her with expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and luxurious trips, all with the expectation that Olivia would start to adapt to the lifestyle he dictated. But to his frustration, she refused it all. Olivia insisted on sticking to her simple, modest routine, never giving in to the trappings of wealth. "I don't need these things, Martin," she would say with a calmness that only made him more irritated. It deeply bothered him. Martin, who always got everything he wanted, was seeing his authority challenged for the first time. It wasn't just about the bet anymore. Now it was personal. He had to win Olivia over somehow, needed to prove that in the end he was the one in control. That's when he started playing more aggressively. He stopped her from going to work, offering reasons like, "You don't need a paycheck anymore," or "Your role as my wife." When Olivia insisted, he made her wait for hours for meetings she thought were important. Martin manipulated schedules, situations, everything to maintain control. But Olivia didn't give in. She was a solid rock against Martin's attempts, and that only intensified his desire to break her. Their relationship began to turn into a minefield. Small provocations surfaced in trivial conversations, where Olivia, with sharp words, diffused every attempt Martin made to make her feel inferior or controlled. On one particularly tense night, Martin tried a more emotional approach. "I don't understand you, Chloe," he said, staring at her with a mix of frustration and curiosity. "Any other woman would be happy to live this kind of luxury, but you act like it's not enough. What do you really want?" Chloe, who had been impassive until that moment, finally lifted her eyes, and they gleamed with an intensity Martin hadn't expected. "What do I want? I want respect, Martin. I'm not a piece on your chessboard. You think you can control me with money, but you're wrong. Money doesn't buy dignity or integrity. You might have all these things around you, but you're empty inside, and that's what you can't stand." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. For the first time, Martin felt that he might be losing more than just control. Olivia wasn't just resisting his power. She was dismantling the facade he had built over the years, and that scared him. No one had ever challenged him like this, and the fact that Olivia saw beyond his wealth made Martin feel exposed. But instead of backing off, Martin decided to tighten his grip. He started making plans to isolate Olivia, to make her realize that without him, her life would be much harder. He cut off contacts, closed doors that could advance her career, and even sabotaged important events she was organizing. However, Olivia wasn't the type to be easily intimidated. With every blow, she stood back up more determined than before. She held on to her dignity, refusing to be shaped by Martin. Then one night Chloe played her own card. "Martin, you think you're in control, don't you?" she said calculatedly. "But what you don't know is that I have a plan too. And believe me, when the time is right, you'll see this whole game is built on something much bigger than you ever imagined." Martin stared at her, surprised. For the first time, he realized he might have underestimated Olivia. And for the first time he felt the fear that, in the end, he might not be the winner of this game. The weeks went by like a tightly stretched rope, growing tenser each day, ready to snap. Martin, in his obsession with control, tried every way to manipulate the situation to his advantage. But Olivia kept resisting without flinching. She was like a fortress he couldn't tear down. Every attempt he made only seemed to reinforce her inner strength. But there was something Martin couldn't deny. As time went on, he started to see Chloe differently. It wasn't just about respecting her resilience. It was something deeper. She was doing something no other woman had ever done. She was disarming him emotionally, and that made him feel uneasy, confused. For the first time, he found himself thinking of her not as part of a bet or an opponent but as a person he genuinely wanted to understand. One night, after a heated argument, Martin found himself alone in the large living room, staring out at the city through the glass windows. The glow of the city lights used to give him a sense of power, but now everything felt empty. He wondered why he was feeling this way. Olivia was just a woman he'd married for 6 months. She should have been just a piece in his game, nothing more. But the truth was, she was stirring something inside him. He, who always controlled his emotions, was now being affected. Olivia could see through his facade, and that made him feel vulnerable. As Martin wrestled with his thoughts, Olivia carried on with her routine. She seemed more distant each day, almost as if she were waiting for something. Martin felt like there was an invisible wall between them, something he couldn't break through, and it tormented him. He didn't know if it was pride or the fear of losing control, but something about Olivia drew him in a way he never imagined possible. "You're different, Martin," said Jonathan, his friend who had proposed the bet during a casual dinner. "Normally, you'd have everything under control by now, but it seems this woman's challenging you in a way no one else has." Martin gave a forced smile, unable to respond right away. He hated to admit that Jonathan was right, but it was clear something was changing. That night, Martin came home determined to settle things. He needed to get Olivia out of his head, needed to remind himself that this was just a contract, nothing more. When he walked into the penthouse, he found Olivia on the couch, reading a book, completely unaware of his presence. "Can we talk, Martin?" he asked, breaking the silence that had become the norm between them. Olivia looked up calmly, closed her book, and gazed at him with a serene but attentive expression. "Of course," she replied, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Martin sat across from her, trying to find the right words. The tension between them was palpable. He knew he couldn't treat this marriage like a simple formality anymore. Something was changing and he had to face it head-on. "What are we doing here, Chloe?" he asked, with a sincerity that even surprised him. "This started as a game, a bet, but I don't know what to think anymore." Chloe stared at him for a few seconds before responding. "I'm not playing, Martin. I never was." Her voice was calm but full of meaning. "From the beginning, I accepted this marriage for reasons that go beyond you. I don't care about the money or your control over things. I'm here for something bigger, and if you haven't realized that by now, maybe it's time to open your eyes." Martin felt a tightness in his chest. It was as if she were revealing a secret he still couldn't figure out. Frustration consumed him. I know you have your secrets, Chloe, but what irritates me is that the more I try to understand you, the more I realize I'm not in control, and I hate that. He suddenly stood up, unable to stay still, as if the weight of that revelation was too much to bear. Chloe remained calm, watching his every move. She slowly got up and walked toward him, stopping just a few inches away. Martin felt his heart race. "Martin," she began, her voice low and soft, "this isn't about control. You've always lived trying to dominate everything and everyone, but with me, you'll have to learn that control isn't always the answer. Sometimes things just need to be what they are." Martin looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he felt a connection he'd never felt before. It was like, for the first time, he was truly seeing Olivia for who she was, not as a piece in his game. "So, what do you want?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. Olivia smiled, a mysterious smile that gave him chills. "I want you to figure that out for yourself, Martin." And with that, she walked away, leaving him there, alone with his thoughts. In the following days, the distance between them seemed to grow. But in a strange way, Martin began to feel closer to Olivia than ever before. He was obsessed with figuring out what she was hiding, what her true intentions were. And at the same time, he felt like he was losing control of himself. He didn't want to admit it, but Olivia was changing the way he saw the world. And the very idea that she could be affecting him so deeply terrified him. As the 6-month marriage neared its end, Martin found himself increasingly consumed by a gnawing curiosity. Each day stretched on like an eternity, the looming revelation he felt on the verge of uncovering twisting his stomach into knots. Olivia had transformed from a mere pawn in his elaborate game of bets into an enigmatic presence, whose every action seemed shrouded in mystery. He couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something monumental, something that could unravel the very foundation of his existence. One evening, after a grueling business meeting, Martin returned to the penthouse later than usual. The balcony light was on, casting a soft glow over New York's sprawling skyline. There, illuminated by the city lights, stood Olivia, poised as though overseeing her empire. Martin knew tonight was the night when everything would be revealed. His heart pounded as he approached her, the echo of his footsteps slicing through the quiet room. The air between them was thick, heavy with anticipation. "I need answers, Chloe," Martin said, his voice firm despite the tempest raging within him. "I can't take this game anymore. You have to tell me the truth." Olivia sighed slowly, rising from her chair to face him. Her eyes, usually calm and calculating, now shimmered with an emotion Martin couldn't decipher. There was something new in her gaze, dark, fierce, and unrelenting. "The truth, Martin," she replied, her lips curling into a bitter smile as she crossed her arms. "Do you really want the truth?" He nodded without hesitation, though the tension in the air grew with each passing second. Martin braced himself for any answer, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. "You have no idea who I am," Olivia began, her voice cold and cutting. "You've always seen people as pawns on your chessboard, but this time, Martin, you were the pawn. I've been playing this game from the start." A chill ran down Martin's spine. The certainty he'd clung to, that he was always the one in control, was crumbling before his eyes. He tried to speak, but Olivia didn't let him. "Do you remember the name Richards?" she continued, her voice sharpening with every word. "Of course you don't. People like you never remember. My father owned a small company, one that struggled to survive until you came along and destroyed it." Martin staggered back, his mind racing to connect the dots. What are you talking about, Chloe?" She took a step toward him, her eyes burning with pain and anger. "My father, Martin. He was an honest man, struggling to support our family until you came along and took everything. You ruined him, Martin. He lost everything, and it led to his death." Olivia paused, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "My father killed himself because of your empire, your success at any cost. The impact of your actions crushed us. While you thrived in luxury, my mother and I sank into debt and despair. We barely had anything to eat. Martin stood frozen, memories flooding back in fragments. There had been so many deals, so many contracts, so many lives affected by his greedy hands. He couldn't remember every company he had crushed to rise to the top, but now, suddenly, it all came rushing back to haunt him. "Chloe, he stammered, desperate to interrupt, but she raised her hand, silencing him. "No!" she shouted, her anger boiling over. "You have no idea what you caused. This isn't just about money, Martin. It's about destroyed lives. You took my father from me, the only person I had in the world. And while you lived your life in luxury, we were left to pick up the pieces." Martin was stunned, his defenses crumbling under the weight of her words. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but no words came. All he could do was stand there, staring at her as guilt pressed down on his chest like a boulder. "But I planned everything," Olivia continued, her tone now more controlled but still laced with resentment. "When I learned about your bet, I saw my chance. I approached you on purpose. I accepted the bet because I wanted you to feel just a fraction of what I felt. I wanted you to know what it's like to be played, manipulated, and left powerless." Martin trembled, the realization hitting him like a tidal wave. He had always thought he was in control, always believed he would come out victorious. But now the tables had turned. He was the target, and Olivia, the player, was controlling the entire board. "Chloe, Martin," he began, his voice weak and trembling. I didn't know. I didn't know." "You never knew, Martin," Olivia interrupted, stepping closer until she was face to face with him. "You never cared. You destroyed lives without a second thought, and now I'm here, not to destroy you, but to make sure you never forget what you did. I want you to feel the pain you caused. And that pain, Martin, will haunt you for the rest of your life." Her words fell over him like a sentence. Martin was faced with something he had never experienced before: the real consequences of his actions. The weight of guilt was crushing, and he knew in that moment he had lost much more than a simple bet. He had lost something he could never get back. Olivia stepped away, leaving him alone in the oppressive silence of the penthouse. Martin felt his legs give out, and he collapsed onto the couch, speechless, with no answers. All that remained was emptiness. The days that followed were a torment of silence and indifference. Olivia ignored him completely, treating him as if he were invisible. At breakfast, she sat in silence, barely lifting her eyes when he tried to speak. His words died in the air, unable to penetrate the wall she had erected between them. Martin, who was accustomed to commanding attention, now found himself ignored in his own home. The absence of her acknowledgement was unbearable. But Olivia didn't stop there. She began actively undermining his confidence in subtle yet painful ways. At work, important meetings were rescheduled without notice, his business decisions questioned, and projects he had initiated mysteriously began to fail. He knew it was Olivia's doing, even if she never admitted it. Her influence was everywhere, pulling the invisible strings that held his life together. Home, things worsened. Olivia adopted a stance of absolute disdain, deliberately distancing herself from any of Martin's attempts at reconciliation. She stopped sitting with him at meals, avoided any conversation beyond the superficial, and responded to his efforts with cold looks, as if his presence was a nuisance. One night, Martin found her in the living room, reading a book. The scene appeared peaceful, but he knew it was a silent trap. He sat on the couch, trying once again to talk. "Chloe," he began, his voice low and pleading, "I know I've done horrible things. I know I've caused you so much pain. But please, can we try to work this out? Can we at least talk?" Chloe slowly closed the book without looking at him. When she finally raised her eyes, her face was so cold it made him shiver. "Talk," she repeated with a bitter laugh. "You think there's something left to say? You want words, Martin. After everything you've done, words are useless." "I was wrong, Olivia," Martin insisted, getting up from the couch and moving closer, desperate for any connection. "I know that. I would do anything to fix what I've done. I can change, I swear. She finally looked at him, her gaze piercing as if challenging him to back up his promises. Change, she said, standing up slowly. Do you think changing now will erase everything? Will it bring my father back? Will it fix the years we spent in misery because of you? No, Martin, it won't. She stepped closer, and Martin felt himself sink, crushed by the intensity of her stare. What you do now isn't for me, it's for you. You'll carry this weight, this guilt, for the rest of your life. Martin stood in silence for the first time, realizing there would be no easy redemption, no instant forgiveness. He wanted to fight for something that could be fixed, but Olivia was beyond repair. In the days that followed, Olivia intensified her punishments. Martin was met with looks of disdain whenever he passed her, and his frustration turned into desperation. He tried in every way possible to show her that he was changing, that he wanted to be better, but every attempt was met with indifference or sarcasm. One night, after a disastrous meeting at work where an important project had been sabotaged, Martin came home to find Olivia on the phone, laughing. He overheard fragments of the conversation and realized she was discussing his decisions at work. He knew it was her. Olivia was destroying everything he had worked for, but in such a subtle, calculated way that no one but him would notice. And she made him suffer in silence. When Olivia hung up the phone, Martin was waiting in the living room. He stared at her, his expression exhausted, full of repressed anger but also pain. You're tearing everything apart, aren't you? He said, his voice low but tinged with frustration. At work here, you're destroying my life. Olivia looked at him with an impassive expression, crossing her arms. Destroying your life? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm just giving back what you gave. Don't worry, Martin. I won't ruin you financially. That would be too simple. I want you to live with the pain. I want you to feel every little loss just like I did. I want you every day to watch everything you built crumble and know that it's your fault. Martin felt the ground disappear beneath his feet once again. It was a nightmare. He had always been the winner, the man who controlled other people's destinies. But now he was the target of a cold and meticulous revenge. Olivia didn't want to destroy him all at once. She wanted him to suffer day by day, with every small defeat, every look of disdain, until he had nothing left but regret. Weeks passed, and Olivia continued to ignore and punish him. Martin, once arrogant and confident, now wandered around the house like a shadow of his former self, trying in every way to earn a forgiveness he knew would never come. He tried to redeem himself, but his efforts were always insufficient. He was trapped in a cycle of guilt and pain, a cycle that Olivia controlled with perfection. But the worst was yet to come. One night, Olivia finally confronted him, this time with a coldness Martin had never seen before. She approached him as he sat on the couch, exhausted and broken, and spoke the words that would haunt him forever. Martin, you took something from me that I can never get back, she began, her voice calm but sharp. Now I'm returning the favor. And you will live with that for the rest of your life. With those words, Olivia left him there, with nothing more to say. She didn't need to, the punishment was already in motion. And Martin knew he would never be the same. Martin Marshall felt trapped in a maze of guilt and despair. Olivia had succeeded in making him experience what it was like to be out of control. The weeks following Olivia's revelation had been unbearable. Martin, no longer the confident, arrogant man who believed he had control over everything, now existed as a shadow, a pale reflection of who he used to be. With each attempt to speak with Olivia, he was met with cold stares, ignored and rejected. Her indifference was eating him alive. He no longer slept, unable to think of anything but trying to fix what he had broken. But the weight of the truth and the actions of his past made that path seem almost impossible. However, something began to change in Martin. He realized that his words no longer held any value. Apologies meant nothing. Olivia needed to see genuine change, real transformation, and he was willing to do anything to prove it to her. He needed actions, not empty promises. One morning Martin woke up determined. He knew he couldn't simply ask for forgiveness. He had to do something different. The first step would be to give Olivia space. She needed to see that he respected her time, that he wouldn't pressure her anymore. But he also knew he had to show that he was still there, in subtle but meaningful ways. Martin began to pay attention to the small things that made up Olivia's life. He observed her daily routines, her preferences, and her likes. He didn't follow her or invade her space but mentally took note of everything she loved. Flowers, especially peonies, the smell of her coffee in the morning, always strong, no sugar. These details, once insignificant, were now the key to his attempt at reconnection. That same afternoon, Martin went to one of the best flower shops in town and bought a bouquet of peonies. He wasn't going to give them to Olivia directly. He knew she'd reject them right away. Instead, he left the flowers on the kitchen table without a note. Simple yet meaningful. He waited anxiously as she went out for a walk. When Olivia returned, she found the bouquet. She didn't say anything, but Martin watched out of the corner of his eye, seeing the exact moment she stopped in front of the flowers. Her expression didn't change, but he noticed her pick up one of the flowers and smell it. It was a small gesture, but for Martin it was a sign. Olivia hadn't rejected them outright. It was progress. In the days that followed, Martin kept up with these small gestures. He carefully set the breakfast table, making her coffee strong just the way she liked it, and then left, making sure not to impose his presence. He left little things she enjoyed within her reach, always without forcing a meeting or conversation. Slowly he was trying to show that he had changed, that he was paying attention, that he genuinely wanted to care for Olivia. But Olivia still wasn't giving in. She kept the wall between them, and Martin knew breaking through that barrier would take time. Still, he wouldn't give up. He was committed to showing her that he was different, that he could win her back but on her terms and with respect for the space she needed. It was on a particularly cold evening that things began to shift. Olivia was on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights. After hesitating for a few moments, Martin walked over to her. He brought her a cup of hot tea, knowing she liked to drink something warm before bed. "Here," he said, keeping his voice calm, not pushing his presence. "I thought you might like something hot." Olivia didn't say anything at first, but she took the cup, her eyes still focused on the city ahead. Martin stood beside her, silent, just trying to be present without intruding. The silence between them was tense, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel unbearable. It was as if something was changing, even if it was barely noticeable. "Why are you doing this, Martin?" Olivia finally broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. Martin knew this was his chance to speak, but he had to be careful. He took a deep breath before responding. "Because I realized that talking doesn't mean anything anymore," he began, looking out at the horizon with her. "My words don't matter. What I did can't be fixed with apologies. But I'm trying to show you that I'm changing. I want to be a better person, not just for you but because I realized I need to be." Olivia remained silent for a few more seconds, still holding the cup of tea. The cold wind blew past them, but the tension seemed to ease a little. "You can't change the past, Martin," she finally said, her voice softer than he expected. "I know," he replied sincerely. "But I can change the future." Olivia looked at him for the first time that night, and Martin saw something different in her eyes. The hardness was still there, but there was a flicker of curiosity. She wasn't ready to fully forgive him. He knew that, but this was a crucial moment. He had touched on something she might want to believe in. In the days that followed, Martin continued his small gestures, but now there was a different energy between them. Olivia still kept her distance, but she wasn't rejecting him as openly as before. She accepted the flowers, the cups of tea, and even allowed him to talk with her during breakfast, albeit briefly and on a superficial level. The barriers were starting to come down, even if only slowly. But the real test came one evening when Martin was about to leave for a meeting. He had dressed up, ready for another business appointment, when Olivia walked into the room with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can you cancel your meeting?" she asked suddenly. Martin stared at her, surprised. She had never shown any interest in his comings and goings since their relationship had fallen apart. He hesitated but then nodded, grabbing his phone and canceling the meeting without a second thought. It was the first time in weeks that Olivia seemed willing to spend time with him, and he wasn't about to miss that opportunity. They sat on the couch, a little distance between them, but for the first time the silence didn't feel uncomfortable. Olivia seemed thoughtful, as if she were processing everything that had happened over the past few months. "I'm not ready to fully forgive you," Olivia said, breaking the silence. "But you're showing me something different. I see that you're trying, and maybe that's the beginning of something." Martin felt his heart race. He couldn't rush things, he knew that, but Olivia's words were enough to keep his hope alive. He knew the road ahead would still be long, but he was willing to take every step if it meant earning her forgiveness, and maybe her love. The night continued peacefully, with the two of them talking about trivial things. But for Martin it was a victory. He was slowly rebuilding something with patience. Olivia was no longer an untouchable figure. She was starting to let her guard down. And Martin wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating her again. Still, there was a shadow hanging over them. Martin knew Olivia hadn't revealed everything yet. There was something she was still holding back, and he needed to be prepared to face it. But for now, the fact that Olivia was willing to talk was enough. The weeks that followed that quiet evening were a mix of tension and hope. For the first time in a long while, Martin felt like he was making progress with Olivia. She no longer treated him with absolute coldness, but she also didn't fully open up. There was a hesitation in the air, a kind of waiting that kept him on edge. He knew he was being tested and he was ready for it. What he didn't know was that something much bigger was about to be revealed. Martin dedicated himself entirely to proving to Olivia that he was a changed man. He cancelled work commitments to spend more time at home, making sure to be available for her without pressuring her or demanding immediate answers. Small gestures like making breakfast together or talking about trivial things in the evening became part of their routine. Slowly, the ice between them began to melt, and Martin noticed that Olivia no longer treated him with the same disdain. However, something still bothered him. Despite the progress, he felt that Olivia was keeping a secret. She remained reserved at certain moments, avoiding deeper conversations about the past or the future. It was as if she was waiting for the right moment to speak, but Martin didn't know what that was. Then, on a quiet night, as rain lightly tapped against the windows of the penthouse, Martin noticed a shift in Olivia's behavior. She seemed more introspective, more distant than usual, as if she was lost in thought. He tried not to push her, but his curiosity was eating away at him. What was she hiding? What hadn't been said yet? Finally, when the silence became unbearable, Martin broke the barrier. "Chloe," he began, his voice low, almost fearful. "I know there's still something between us that you haven't told me. I can feel it." He looked into her eyes, waiting for any sign of her reaction. "Please, if there's something you're still holding back, I need to know." Olivia, who was sitting on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, took a deep breath, initially avoiding Martin's gaze. The silence that followed was agonizing, but Martin knew he had to be patient. He knew forcing anything now could undo all the progress he had made. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of pain and resolve. "You're right, Martin," she said, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "I've been holding something back, something I didn't think I could tell you until now. But maybe it's time." Martin felt the air tighten around him. Whatever it was, he knew it would change everything. He leaned forward slightly, waiting for the revelation that was about to come, but also dreading what he might hear. "Do you remember the company you destroyed, the one my father managed?" Olivia began, her tone firm but her expression showing deep pain. "I told you that you destroyed our family, and that's true. But that's not all you destroyed." Martin looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Olivia lowered her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost a whisper. "I was pregnant, Martin." Those words hit Martin like a crushing weight. He blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. "What?" he whispered, stunned. "I was pregnant at the time when everything happened," Olivia continued, her eyes still fixed on the floor. "And when we lost everything, when my father was gone, the pressure and stress of it all, I lost the baby." Martin's world stopped spinning as Olivia's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a truth he could never have imagined. The revelation that she had been pregnant, and that she had lost their child, was like a second death, one he hadn't even known to mourn until now. He felt the guilt crush him, suffocating every ounce of breath left in his lungs. I had no idea," Martin stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Olivia, if I had known." "But you didn't know," Olivia interrupted, her voice trembling but resolute. Tears streamed down her face, but her gaze remained steady, piercing through him. "You didn't care enough to know. You destroyed lives without looking back. My father, my baby. Everything was gone because of you." The pain in her voice was unbearable, and Martin felt as though he were being torn apart from the inside. He had always prided himself on his ability to navigate life's challenges, to solve problems with money or charm. But this was something he couldn't fix. No amount of wealth or influence could bring back what he had taken from her. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Martin said finally, his voice raw with emotion. "What I did is unforgivable. But please, Olivia, let me try to make it right. Let me prove that I'm not the man I used to be." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She wiped her tears away with the back of her hand, her breathing uneven. Finally she spoke, her voice softer but still laced with pain. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Martin," she admitted. "What you did, it changed me. Broke me. But," she paused, as if weighing her next words carefully, "I can see that you're trying. Maybe there's a chance that one day I can find a way to move forward. But it won't be easy. It won't be quick." Martin nodded, his heart aching with a mix of hope and despair. He knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but at least Olivia was willing to consider the possibility of a different future. "I'll do whatever it takes," Martin promised, his voice filled with determination. "No matter how long it takes, I'll prove to you that I've changed, that I can be someone you trust, someone you can maybe one day forgive." Olivia studied him for a moment longer, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. Finally she gave a small nod, her expression softening just slightly. "We'll see," she said quietly, her voice tinged with both caution and a flicker of hope. "We'll see if you can." The days following Olivia's revelation were transformative for Martin. Every word she had spoken stayed with him, weighing heavily on his mind as he grappled with the guilt of all the pain he had caused. But instead of sinking into regret, Martin decided that the pain and guilt would be his fuel for change. He didn't just want to win Olivia's love back. He wanted to become a man worthy of her respect and the respect of the many people he had hurt throughout his ruthless business career. That morning Martin made a decision. He wouldn't just stand by, letting the past condemn him forever. He would start over, and the first step would be to repair as much of the damage as he could, to prove to Olivia that he had truly changed. He began tracking down the families whose lives had been destroyed by his business dealings. His first visit was to the family of an old competitor whose business he had ruined years ago. He arrived unannounced, knocking on the door of a modest house in a neighborhood that was a far cry from the opulence of his own life. The man who answered the door was a stranger to Martin, but the pain in his eyes was familiar. "I'm Martin Marshall," Martin said, his voice filled with a sincerity he barely recognized in himself. "I'm here to apologize." The man stared at him for a long moment, disbelief clear in his eyes. "Apologize?" he laughed bitterly. "What's that going to change now?" "I can't change the past," Martin replied firmly. "But I can try to help rebuild the future. I'm here to offer compensation, to help fix what I destroyed. Over the next few weeks, Martin continued his journey of redemption. He knocked on doors, met with families, and offered not just money but his time and effort to truly understand the impact of his actions. He began donating large sums to small businesses that had been hurt by his corporate maneuvers, setting up recovery programs to help other entrepreneurs rebuild. Olivia watched everything from a distance. At first, she remained cautious, observing how Martin behaved. She knew he was trying to change, but forgiveness wouldn't come easily. However, as the days passed and Martin showed a true transformation, she began to feel something new toward him, renewed respect and admiration she hadn't expected. He was changing, and he was proving that his words were no longer empty. One evening, Olivia was standing on the balcony, watching the city lights, when Martin quietly approached her. He had just returned from another one of his reconciliation visits, and his expression was different now. Calmer, more resolute. "How was it today?" Olivia asked, still looking out at the horizon. Martin sighed, a deep sigh that carried months of effort and regret. "Tough," he admitted, "but necessary. Every conversation, every apology, it's a step toward becoming a better person. Not just for you, Olivia. For me too." She finally turned to look at him. There was something different in her gaze too. The hardness that had always been there, the anger she'd held onto, seemed to have softened. At that moment, she saw that Martin was truly changing. He was no longer the arrogant man who had entered her life with a bet. He was someone fighting to be different, someone willing to fight for them. "I can see that, Martin," Olivia said, her voice soft but firm. "And I want you to know that I'm ready to try. Maybe it's time we leave the past behind and build something new." Martin felt a wave of relief that he didn't even realize he was waiting for. Those words meant more to him than he could have imagined. Olivia was willing to give them a chance, not as the couple forced together by a bet, but as two people ready to start over. As the 6-month marriage agreement came to an end, something surprising began to happen. Olivia and Martin grew closer. Their conversations became less formal, less tense. They shared moments of laughter and connection, and slowly, love started to blossom in a way neither of them had expected. They were no longer the distant couple trapped in an arranged marriage. Now they were two people rediscovering each other in a genuine, heartfelt way. One night, as the 6-month period was about to end, Martin prepared a special dinner. He knew this moment would be pivotal. They had come so far, and he didn't want the marriage to end there. "Olivia," he said during dinner. His voice filled with a nervousness he hadn't expected to feel. "I know our agreement is almost over, but I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end. I've fallen in love with you, Olivia. Truly. And I want us to continue. But now as a real couple. No bets. No games." Olivia looked at him, surprised by the sincerity of his words, but also with her heart warmed. She realized she felt something for him too, something that had quietly grown over the past few weeks. They had started as adversaries, but now they were in love, in a deep and real way. "I love you too, Martin," Olivia said, her voice gentle but firm. "And I want to try. I want to build something with you. But this time as equals, as a real couple." Those moments were pure happiness for both of them. They had overcome obstacles that once seemed impossible, and now they were ready to move forward together. Months later, Olivia started to notice something different about her body. She felt nauseous in the mornings, something she wasn't used to. It wasn't until after a checkup that she was sure she was pregnant. When Olivia told Martin, his reaction was pure joy. He embraced her, laughing and crying at the same time. Everything they had gone through, all the pain and heartache, now seemed to lead to this moment of renewal. They were ready to start a new life together, with a new family on the way. "I want to do this right this time," Martin said, knowing exactly what he needed to do. "I want to marry you again. But this time for real. Not because of a bet, not for any reason other than loving you and wanting to spend my life with you." Olivia smiled, her tears of happiness mingling with his. "I want that too, Martin," she replied. "This time it'll be a real wedding, a fresh start." Their new wedding was an intimate celebration with a few close friends and family. No superficial glamour, no rush from business or bets. Just Olivia and Martin, united by true love, ready to face the future together. Martin knew he still had a lot to prove, not just to Olivia but to himself and the families he had harmed in the past. But now he had something to fight for. A new life alongside the woman he loved and the child they were expecting. And this time, he was determined to be the man Olivia deserved and the father their child would need. As they danced slowly at the end of the ceremony, Olivia rested her head on Martin's chest and whispered, "Who would have thought it all started with a bet?" Martin smiled, holding her close. "Who would have thought it'd be the best bet I ever made?" And with a future full of love, redemption, and hope, they were ready for the next chapter of their lives. What did you think of Olivia and Martin's journey? Did Olivia make the right choice in forgiving him, or would you have handled things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this story. If you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you so much for watching. We hope this story inspired you and left you with something to think about. Love, forgiveness, and redemption. These are journeys we all experience in different ways. Until next time, take care and see you again soon.